I offer the head of the traitor who killed her father and a contract of unrestricted autonomy." Maximus Thorne's voice cut through the obsidian grand hall like a blade of ice, making 5 Alpha Lords turn in shock. Cordelia Vance felt the air escape her lungs. Did this giant of the North know something the others didn't? Her heart pounded as his golden eyes found hers across the multitude. It wasn't desire she saw there. It was recognition. As if he knew precisely what she hid in her mind. The scent of burning sandalwood and rancid fear permeated the stale air of the obsidian grand hall in Viridian Heights, where the decaying old money elite gathered to buy and sell lives as if they were prize horses. Cordelia Vance stood at the center of the raised dais, an ethereal figure, amidst the chaos of voices and bids, echoing through the black marble walls. She did not tremble. Years of brutal conditioning at the hands of her uncle, Reginald Vance, had transformed any visible reaction into a luxury she could not afford. But inside, her Omega heart beat against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape an impending storm. At 20 years old, Cordelia had learned that survival meant emotional invisibility. Every muscle of her body, sculpted by deprivation, remained tense, controlled, while her violet eyes, a genetic rarity that made her lineage even more valuable, observed the men who would decide her fate with the indifference of one who had already accepted that free will was an illusion. The auctioneer, Elias Thornberry, a fleshy man with fingers bedecked with rings that caught the candlelight like golden talons, gestured dramatically as he described her qualities. Cordelia closed her eyes briefly, trying to block out the words that reduced her to reproductive and aesthetic characteristics. She knew she was not merely a bankrupt noble orphan being sold to pay the astronomical debts her cruel uncle, Reginald Vance, had accumulated in her name. She was far more dangerous than any of them imagined. Her mind, cursed with absolute eidetic memory since childhood, was a living vault that guarded secrets capable of toppling entire domains. During the 5 years she had spent in the office of her late father, Royal Archivist Arthur Vance, she had absorbed every document, every whispered conversation, every conspiratorial glance that had crossed the mahogany desk where he worked. She knew where the bodies were buried, literally. She knew every diversion of gold from the Southern holdings, every bribe that had altered the course of seemingly honorable decisions. More dangerously still, she knew that the Confederacy of High Pax was rotted from within like forgotten fruit in the sun, with tendrils of corruption reaching even the most sacred thrones. The auction was not about marriage or lineage, as all pretended to believe. It was about containment. Whoever bought her would control not just her body, but her silence. And silence, Cordelia had learned, was the most valuable currency in a world built on lies. The tension in the obsidian Grand Hall became palpable as bids escalated to sums that could buy entire territories. Elias Thornberry's voice swelled with excitement as numbers soared, echoing through the vast space like a hammer striking the coffin of her freedom. Elder Augustus Stone of the Rockies High Pack rose first, his thundering voice echoing ancestral authority. A man in his 50s, with silver hair gleaming under the golden light of the chandeliers, and a posture that spoke of decades of military command. 500 gold coins for the purity of her lineage, he declared, his calculating eyes appraising Cordelia as if she were a map of territories to be conquered. Alpha Leopold Vance of the Central Valley clan responded, rising with the predatory grace of one accustomed to getting everything he desired. Younger than Augustus, perhaps in his early 30s, with angular features women found devastatingly attractive. 600 coins. His smooth voice carried a seductive authority. Beauty such as hers deserves to be properly appreciated. The way his eyes raked over Cordelia's body made her skin crawl with repulsion. Constantine Shaw of the Coastal Enclave then entered the bidding, and the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. Something in the shadows of his smile made even the most experienced guards stir uneasily. Known for his refined cruelty, a man who had transformed torture into an art. 700 coins, he said softly, his eyes fixed on Cordelia's delicate throat as if measuring exactly where he would make the first cut. Such a beautiful throat. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. The last of the conventional Alpha Lords to participate was Patriarch Bartholomew Barty Flint of the Mojave Confederacy, a man who compensated for a lack of charisma with obscene wealth. 800 coins, he bellowed, more to display his economic power than from any genuine desire for the young woman on the dais. But it was the absolute silence from the darkest VIP booth that made every hair on Cordelia's nape prickle as if a storm approached. There, enshrouded in shadows that seemed to move of their own volition, stood the legendary figure of Maximus Thorne, the Alpha Lord of the Glacier Peaks territories. Even seated, it was clear he was a giant among men. 7 feet of muscle sculpted by years of war and survival in the most hostile of known domains. Scars mapped his exposed skin like an atlas of ancient battles, each mark telling a tale of violence endured. His black hair cascaded to his shoulders in wild waves no courtly etiquette could tame, and when the occasional light caught his eyes, they burned with the fierce golden glow of a predator at the peak of the hunt. Maximus Thorne was a brutal legend mothers invoked to frighten disobedient children. They whispered that the North was a cemetery of ice, where nothing but death could truly thrive, and that he ruled that desolation with fists of iron and a heart even colder. His reputation for fierce isolationism was known across all domains. He rarely left his lands, and when he did, it was always for reasons that ended in bloodshed. Cordelia felt his golden eyes scorch her skin like embers, but unlike the other Alpha Lords, there was no lust in his gaze. There was something far more unsettling: recognition, as if he could see straight through her, even to the poisoned treasures of memory she guarded deep within her mind. The auctioneer, Elias Thornberry, was about to close the sale to Constantine Shaw, whose shark-like grin widened with each passing second, when a voice cut through the opulent air like thunder, born from the very depths of the earth. "I offer the head of the traitor who murdered her father, and a contract of unrestricted autonomy." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the candle flames seemed to freeze, as if the very air had forgotten how to move. Maximus Thorne had not offered gold, silver, or territories. He had offered justice and freedom, 2 things Cordelia had long thought lost to her forever. Constantine Shaw rose abruptly, his face twisted in a mask of fury. "This is inadmissible. Debts cannot be paid with mere promises of vengeance." But Elias Thornberry, suddenly pale, quickly consulted a dusty tome of ancient laws. His hands trembled as he flipped through yellowed pages until he found what he sought. The archaic blood debt statutes are still in effect," he stammered. "If the crime against the debtor's family can be proven, vengeance amounts to full payment." Chaos erupted in the hall. Voices rose in furious protest. Chairs were overturned. Hands flew to sword hilt. But amidst all that confusion, Cordelia could only stare at Maximus Thorne, desperately trying to understand how he knew about her father's suspicious death, when she herself wasn't absolutely certain it had been murder. The bid was accepted under ancient blood debt statutes, laws no one remembered existing until that very moment. Maximus's guards, colossal men, sculpted from the very ice of the glacier peaks, advanced to escort her. Cordelia had steeled herself to be dragged to some grim dungeon in the frigid depths of the north, where her knowledge would be extracted through methods she preferred not to contemplate. Instead, throughout the entire 3-week journey across landscapes that gradually transformed from verdant hillsides to endless white plains, Maximus maintained a respectful distance that bordered on clinical. He never touched her once. He made no attempt to scent her neck for the pheromones that would betray a mating compatibility. He did none of the things alphas traditionally did with newly acquired omegas. The entourage traveled in relative silence, broken only by the rhythmic thud of hooves on ever-thickening snow and the wind growing sharper with each passing day. They journeyed northward. Maximus always rode ahead, a solitary figure against the white horizon, as if he were more force of nature than man. On the nights they stopped to rest in isolated inns or makeshift encampments, he ensured she had separate, suitable quarters. He treated her with the formality he would extend to an ambassador from a neutral domain, with respect, yet devoid of any intimacy. Cordelia began to wonder if she had misread the entire situation. Perhaps he truly held no interest in her as a woman, but merely as a source of intelligence. The possibility should have brought her relief, yet instead, it ignited an unnerving curiosity about his true motives. When they finally arrived at the Ice-Vein Citadel, Cordelia understood why the North was considered uninhabitable by the standards of the southern domains. Maximus's fortress was less a castle than an organic fusion of architecture and the icy mountain itself where it stood. Spire-like towers pierced the sky like spears, and the walls were constructed of a bluish stone that seemed to absorb and reflect light supernaturally. But it was where Maximus led her next that truly surprised Cordelia. Not to an ornate bridal chamber or a grim dungeon, but to a vast war room that occupied the very heart of the citadel. The walls were covered with maps of all known domains, marked with symbols she could not decipher, but which clearly represented complex political and military maneuvers. "I did not purchase a wife," he said at last, his voice raw, like one who had wielded silence as a weapon for so long that words emerged like ground glass. "I rescued a strategist." Cordelia turned to face him, and for the first time since the auction, allowed confusion to bloom across her face. "I don't understand." Maximus Thorne approached a central table laden with ancient scrolls, yet maintained a deliberate distance, ensuring Cordelia Vance wouldn't feel ensnared by his imposing presence. "I know what you witnessed in your father's clandestine papers, Cordelia, and I desperately need you to recall every detail, for the very man who orchestrated his demise now seeks to shatter us all." The first startling revelation struck Cordelia like a punch to the gut. "How do you know about your memory?" Maximus finally looked directly at her, and she saw something unexpected in his golden eyes. Raw pain. "Because I am not a benevolent savior by nature. I am a desperate Alpha Lord. I knew of your secret not through magic or intuition, but because my own spy attempted to save your father and failed." The insidious implications of those words reverberated through Cordelia's mind, like stones cast into a placid lake. You knew my father would be killed?" "I knew he was in grave danger. He was investigating something that could utterly destroy the balance of power among all the shifter domains. I dispatched someone to protect him, but we arrived too late." Maximus's voice carried a gravitas that spoke of guilt borne for years. "Your father died for coming too close to the truth, and you inherited not only his memory but the target on his back." Cordelia sank into one of the chairs surrounding the table, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. What truth? What was he investigating? Corruption that reaches to the very heart of the Confederacy of Shifter Domains. A group calling themselves the Black Hand has infiltrated positions of power across all territories. They don't merely desire wealth or political influence. They seek absolute control over all Lycan bloodlines, especially the pure alphas. Maximus gestured to the map spread around them. "I have been battling them for 5 years, but they are always one step ahead. It's as if they know exactly what moves I will make." "And you believe I possess information that can help?" "I know you do." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "Your father, Royal Archivist Arthur Vance, documented everything. Every clandestine meeting, every suspicious transaction, every name mentioned in conversations he overheard. If there is a way to identify who truly stands behind the Black Hand, that information resides within your memory." Cordelia closed her eyes, allowing her mind to traverse the infinite archives of memories she carried. It was true. She remembered countless occasions when her father worked late, meticulously jotting down details of meetings that seemed to leave him increasingly disturbed. "Why didn't you tell me this at the auction?" she asked. "Because Constantine Shaw was observing every word, every gesture. If he had known I was aware of your unique gift, he would have found a way to secure your custody first. Maximus edged closer, and Cordelia perceived how he moved, each step calculated not to appear threatening, despite his intimidating size. Constantine isn't just a cruel alpha lord, Cordelia. He is the leader of the Black Hand. The first month in the Glacier Peaks territories was an experience that redefined everything Cordelia thought she knew about survival and adaptation. The cold was merely the least of her trials. It was a living, breathing presence that constantly tested the limits of human endurance. Winds carved exposed skin like icy blades, and blizzards materialized without warning, transforming the world into a white maelstrom where earth and sky became indistinguishable. But worse than the hostile environment was the northern Lycan culture, founded upon a rigid hierarchy where brute strength and absolute loyalty dictated one's worth. Cordelia, perceived as a fragile southern omega delivered by auction, was initially met with a blend of disdain and morbid curiosity by Maximus's Glacier Peaks Guard. The warriors, men and women forged by the brutal northern conditions, observed her with the sort of detached interest one might afford an exotic animal destined to perish with the first true storm. Whispered comments trailed her steps through the ice-veined citadel's stone corridors. Words like porcelain doll and the Alpha Lord's plaything reached her ears with enough frequency to confirm they were no accident. Yet Cordelia had learned a great deal about survival during her years under her cruel uncle's tutelage. Instead of shrinking from the hostility, she observed, she learned, she adapted. She began to earn respect not through submission or attempts to appease, but through a practical utility no one could afford to ignore. By the third day, solely utilizing her eidetic memory, she corrected patrol routes that had been flawed for months, identifying blind spots in the Citadel's defenses that permitted minor but constant infiltrations by wild predators. By the end of the first week, she uncovered a systematic embezzlement in the fortress's grain supplies simply by reviewing records for 5 minutes, a problem local administrators had fruitlessly wrestled with for months. Maximus observed her during these demonstrations with a burning intensity, as if he were attempting to decipher a particularly complex enigma. There was something in his gaze that transcended mere appreciation for her abilities, a hunger he held rigidly in check. Yet one Cordelia began to perceive in the fleeting moments he believed her attention was elsewhere. Still, a palpable barrier between them seemed to fortify with each passing day. Maximus maintained a distance that stretched beyond the professional, veering almost into the pathological. He never touched her, not even by accident. When they were compelled to work together over maps or documents, he meticulously positioned himself so that neither their hands nor their garments might brush. Cordelia Vance initially attributed this to status differences or a personal code of honor. But as weeks passed, she suspected something deeper, more personal, fueled his behavior. The discovery happened by accident at the end of the first month. Cordelia Vance, returning from checking fodder inventories at the stables, realized she'd forgotten parchments in Maximus Thorne's office. The Icevine Citadel was silent. It was between guard shifts, and even main corridors lay deserted. She headed to the office, expecting it empty. Opening the door, she found a scene etched forever into her eidetic memory. Maximus Thorne collapsed behind his desk, one hand pressed to his chest, the other clutching the table's edge, as if clinging to life. What moved her, before conscious thought, were black veins pulsing beneath his pale neck skin, climbing like venomous webs to his jawline. She'd never seen such a sight, but instinctively knew it was terribly, terribly wrong. "Get out," he snarled without lifting his head, his voice distorted by pain. "Now." But Cordelia Vance had already crossed the office, her Omega mind cataloging the signs of an alpha in distress. His scent was wrong. Instead of cedar and ice, a metallic, sickly undertone made her protective instincts scream in alarm. "You're ill," she said, extending her hand before remembering he avoided all physical contact. "Let me help." "Don't touch me." His voice ripped out as a roar, the effort draining his strength. Black veins pulsed more intensely. Cordelia Vance saw cold sweat bead on his forehead. Then she understood. Connections formed in her mind with speed only her exceptional memory allowed. Overheard fragments. Oblique Glacier Peak's guard references to the Alpha Lord's sacrifice. His constant use of gloves even within the heated ice vein citadel. Silver rot, she whispered, and watched his body clench as if she had struck an open wound. Silver rot was a dark Lycan legend. Slow poisoning from prolonged hunter's weapon exposure. Silver didn't just burn them. In sufficient quantities over time, it infiltrated the bloodstream, creating an infection that gradually corroded the system from inside out. "How many years?" she asked softly. Maximus Thorne finally lifted his head, and she saw his golden eyes were dull with pain. 7, perhaps 8. It's hard to know exactly when it began. "Why didn't you say anything?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "For what?" "So my enemies would know the Alpha Lord of the Glacier Peak's territories is dying. So my own pack would begin to question every decision I make. An Alpha who cannot even stand on his own does not deserve to lead." The revelation fundamentally altered the dynamic between them. The giant Alpha Lord's vulnerability before the petite Omega forged a forced intimacy neither was prepared to confront. For the first time since arriving in the north, Cordelia saw Maximus not as an untouchable force of nature, but as a man burdened by a weight that was slowly destroying him. But it was when she started appearing in his office during his most intense attacks, always under the pretense of checking maps or discussing strategies, that Cordelia realized something that made her question everything she thought she knew about their situation. Maximus never asked how she knew exactly when he would need help. And she never mentioned that she could feel his pain through a connection that should not exist between strangers. Gradually, she began preparing tonics based on ancient recipes she had read only once, years ago, in medical texts her father kept in his private library. The concoctions did not cure the silver rot. That was a battle no herb knew, but they alleviated the symptoms enough for Maximus to function during the most severe attacks. In return, he began teaching her things no Omega etiquette manual would ever include. How to use a dagger to kill, not merely wound. How to read the micro-expressions that revealed lies. How to understand the complex politics of the pack, where loyalty was a currency that could be won or lost with a single ill-made decision. But during their training sessions, when their bodies inevitably drew close, Cordelia began to notice something disturbing. There were moments, fragments of seconds, when she swore she could feel his emotions as if they were her own. And by the way, he sometimes halted abruptly mid-instruction, looking at her with an expression of controlled shock. She suspected the phenomenon was not unilateral, which meant something far deeper and impossible was transpiring between them, something that neither the lethalium nor any other rational explanation could justify. The attraction between them grew like a slow-building storm, an electrical tension neither dared to name or acknowledge. Cordelia noticed the way his eyes lingered on her hands when she prepared the remedies, the subtle shift in his breathing when she leaned over maps close enough for him to catch her natural scent. Maximus, for his part, visibly struggled against instincts that pulled him towards her. Several times she caught him observing her with an intensity that made her skin tingle, only to see him abruptly pull away as if her touch could burn him. The reason behind his resistance became clear one night, when a particularly severe silver rot attack left him temporarily delirious. Amidst the feverish murmurs, she heard fragments of his true concern. He believed his touch was literally toxic due to the disease, that any prolonged physical contact could contaminate a pure Omega like her. Cordelia, for her part, feared confusing gratitude with love, responsibility with desire. She had been sold as property and rescued for strategic convenience. How could she distinguish between genuine feelings and the natural dependency that develops between protector and protected? But there were moments when their hands accidentally brushed, reaching for the same map, when he watched her prepare medicine with an expression that went far beyond mere appreciation, that she suspected they were both fighting something far greater than gratitude or convenience. something that was about to be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. In the 3rd month, as the first Arctic flowers began to pierce the eternal snow like promises that even the harshest winter eventually yields, the first major twist exploded over their lives like an avalanche. Constantine, the Alpha Lord who had lost the auction and whom Maximus had identified as the leader of the Black Hand, had not simply accepted defeat and returned to his coastal enclave. Instead, he had spent the months gathering evidence and preparing a legal attack that was more dangerous than any army. Emissaries arrived at the citadel not bearing declarations of war, but carrying legal documents that invoked an ancient property review statute. Constantine alleged that Maximus's purchase was fundamentally illegal, because Cordelia was, technically, betrothed to him by a prior marital contract that preceded the auction. If he could prove this in tribunal, it would not only reverse the sale, but also establish a legal basis to accuse Maximus of abduction of a promised bride, a crime that traditionally resulted in death. The document the emissaries presented seemed authentic at first glance. It bore the official seal of the Vance estate, a signature that appeared genuine, and dates that coincided with the period before the royal archivist's death. To any casual observer, it was irrefutable proof that Constantine had prior legal claim over Cordelia. But when Cordelia examined the document with the microscopic precision of her eidetic memory, a subtle but fatal discrepancy leaped out at her. The signature date, inscribed in her father's own hand, corresponded to a period when she knew with absolute certainty that he was traveling to the Eastern Domains on a diplomatic mission. "This contract is a forgery," she told Maximus that night, pointing to the questionable date. "My father wasn't even in the domain when this was supposedly signed." "Are you absolutely certain?" Maximus asked, and she could see hope and despair warring in his eyes. "I am certain of where my father was every day for the last 5 years of his life. This date is impossible." But even as she said it, Cordelia felt a growing unease. If Constantine had forged the document, why choose such an obviously problematic date? Unless he knew I would be able to prove it false. The implication hung between them like a suspended blade. If Constantine had created a deliberately flawed document, it was because he had a plan to deal with any objection Cordelia might raise. He was playing a deeper game than either of them had imagined. The tribunal was called to convene in the neutral territory of the lunar nexus, a sacred place where, by ancient tradition, no bloodshed was permitted, and where all Alpha Lords were considered equal before tribal law. The journey there would take weeks, traversing territories controlled by lesser Alpha Lords whose loyalty was questionable at best. It was during the preparations for the journey that Cordelia discovered a truth that shook the foundations of everything she thought she knew about herself. While organizing her few personal possessions, she found a vial of medicine she didn't remember owning, hidden deep within her original luggage from the auction. The glass was small, no larger than her thumb, made of a dark crystal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The liquid within was colorless, odorless, and moved with a viscosity slightly different from water. There was no label, but something about that vial awakened a deep disquiet in her mind. When she showed the discovery to Maximus, his reaction was immediate and violent. The vial slipped from his grasp, shattering against the stone floor, the liquid shimmering briefly before evaporating completely. "Lithalium," he whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of rage and horror. "Where did you get this?" "I didn't get it. I found it in my things." "What is lithalium?" "A substance that suppresses traumatic memories, yet possesses side effects few know. In constant low doses, it also blocks the scent of fated mates." Maximus Thorne's golden eyes narrowed dangerously. "Someone was drugging you, Cordelia Vance, possibly for years." The revelation struck her like lightning. If her memories contained gaps, if there had been mental fogs during crucial moments of her life, it was not a natural failing of her gift, but deliberate sabotage. Someone had been deliberately obscuring parts of her eidetic memory, creating blind spots she hadn't even known existed. "This means that," she began, but could not finish the sentence. "That we are fighting a war with faulty ammunition," Maximus Thorne completed grimly. "And that the information we thought we possessed might be incomplete or distorted. Worse still, if Lithalium truly blocked the recognition of fated mates, it meant that any attraction she felt for Maximus Thorne, or that he felt for her, could be artificial, a mere consequence of the drug finally leaving her system after months without doses. The journey to the tribunal became a race against time for multiple reasons. Not only did they need to arrive before Constantine Shaw could manipulate the legal process in his favor, but they also needed to understand how much of Cordelia Vance's past had been obscured, and if there was a way to recover lost memories before her testimony was required. During the first week of their passage, Cordelia Vance began to feel subtle shifts in her perception. Sense became more intense, emotions more vivid. It was as if the world was gradually becoming more real as the Lithalium continued to leave her system. But something more unsettling was stirring. Cordelia Vance began experiencing fragmented dreams, visions of memories she could not discern as real or imagined. Scenes from her childhood seemed subtly different from what she recalled, conversations that perhaps had never happened, or perhaps had been deliberately erased. Maximus Thorne observed her growing disquiet, yet when she attempted to articulate the dreams, she perceived something in his golden eyes that silenced her. It was as if he knew something about these visions that remained unknown to her, and that suspicion would soon harden into a terrible certainty. It was during an ambush in the second week that everything irrevocably shifted. They were traversing a narrow pass between snow-blanketed hills when masked figures emerged from the tree line, like predatory wolves from their lairs. These were no common brigands. Their movements were too coordinated, their equipment too costly. These were professional assassins, dispatched specifically to ensure Cordelia Vance would never reach the Lunar Nexus Tribunal. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Maximus and his Glacier Peaks Guard fought with the desperate ferocity of men who knew that defeat meant more than death. It meant the triumph of the corruption they had sworn to destroy. The air filled with the clang of metal against metal, cries of pain and fury, and the metallic tang of blood spreading across the pristine snow. Cordelia Vance found herself fighting back-to-back with Maximus Thorne, the dagger he had taught her to wield becoming a lethal extension of her will to survive. The adrenaline and fear pulsing through her veins did something unexpected. The residual effect of the Lithalium wavered like a flame in the wind. Suddenly, Maximus's scent, deep cedar, eternal ice, and the musky aroma uniquely his own, hit Cordelia with the force of a tidal wave. It wasn't merely physical attraction. It was recognition at the most primitive and fundamental level. Every cell in her body screamed a single word: mate. A wave of liquid heat coursed through her veins, making her skin tingle as if 1,000 butterflies touched her simultaneously. His scent enveloped her like a drug, awakening instincts she hadn't known she possessed. Her lips parted involuntarily, and she felt a deep, primitive pulse in the core of her being, as if her entire body was calling out for his. The mate bond was not something that would form in the future through courtship or an arranged marriage. It already existed, had always existed, but had been chemically suppressed for years. The discovery struck her with such intensity that she stumbled, almost allowing an enemy blade to find her throat. Maximus felt the change immediately. His golden eyes dilated until they nearly swallowed his irises, and a roar tore from his throat that was not entirely human. Her scent, wildflowers and something sweet he had never been able to identify before, now carried the unmistakable mark of his fated mate. His muscles clenched with the primitive need to claim her right then, to press her against his chest, and feel every delicate curve of her body against his. But even in the throes of battle, even with his most primal instincts screaming to claim her instantly, Maximus managed to retain enough control to understand the devastating implications of that discovery. If he were to mark Cordelia before the Lunar Nexus Tribunal, Constantine Shaw would allege that any testimony she gave had been coerced through the mate bond. Her credibility as a witness would be shattered, and with it, any chance of exposing the corruption of the Black Hand. They finished the battle as mates who recognized each other but could not claim each other. It was a torture that went beyond the physical, a forced separation at the exact moment their bodies and souls screamed for union. The 4th and 5th months became a period of refined psychological torture, testing the very limits of human endurance. To exist within the same ice-veined citadel, to toil side by side, to feel the constant magnetic pull of an active mate bond, yet to be brutally forbidden from acting upon it, was slowly annihilating them both from within. Maximus grew even more distant, if such a thing were possible. He avoided being alone with Cordelia, communicating primarily through intermediaries, and when direct interaction was unavoidable, he maintained enough physical distance to prevent their scents from mingling in the air. Yet Cordelia could discern the palpable tension in every line of his body. The way his fists clenched when she entered a room, as if he were physically battling the primal urge to pull her against himself. Cordelia, in turn, discovered that the recognition of the mate bond had awakened aspects of her omega nature that the lethalium had suppressed. She found herself waking in the middle of the night, her body burning with desire, sheets drenched in sweat, and a primitive hunger that left her gasping. Her most basic instincts demanded she seek out her alpha and submit to the mating ritual that would solidify their bond. Worse still were the accidental moments of proximity. When their fingers merely brushed while reaching for documents, she felt electric shocks coursing through her entire nervous system. When he leaned over maps close enough for her to feel the heat of his body, every nerve ending screamed for her to turn and press her lips against the powerful curve of his neck to mark the territory her body recognized as rightfully hers. And by the way, his breath hitched unevenly on these occasions, by how his eyes darkened until they almost completely swallowed the golden irises. She knew he was battling against precisely the same impulses. Even worse, her eidetic memory, now free from chemical interferences, began to retrieve fragments of long-obscured recollections. She started to remember childhood moments when she sensed scents she couldn't identify, sensations of incompleteness that she now understood to be her system, detecting that her fated mate was somewhere in the world, yet still unfound. During this period of forced waiting, other truths began to emerge. Cordelia discovered through intercepted letters that Constantine Shaw was not merely asserting legal claim over her. He had been actively spreading rumors that Maximus Thorne had used alpha coercion and psychic, chemical manipulation to corrupt a pure Omega, transforming her into a tool for his own political purposes. The propaganda proved incredibly effective. Domains that had previously remained neutral began to question whether the North was truly battling corruption or had simply found a more sophisticated method to perpetuate it. When the moment finally arrived to depart for the tribunal, both Cordelia Vance and Maximus Thorne were visibly exhausted by the tension of denying their most fundamental instincts. But they had no choice. The trial would determine not only their personal destinies, but the future of all shifter domains. The Lunar Nexus Tribunal was an ancient structure that predated the formation of the modern shifter domains. Built entirely of white moonstone that shone with its own light, the circular hall was designed so that no participant had a positional advantage over another. It was a place where, theoretically, only truth mattered. Constantine Shaw arrived with an impressive retinue, including lawyers specialized in archaic blood debt statutes and a personal guard that resembled a small armada. He had prepared for this legal battle with the same meticulousness he would apply to a military campaign. Maximus Thorne, in contrast, brought only a few essential Glacier Peaks guard and Cordelia Vance. His strategy depended entirely on her eidetic memory and the truth of the information she could provide. It was a risky gamble in a legal system that did not always favor justice over political influence. The first day of the trial was dedicated to formal allegations. Constantine Shaw presented his forged contract with a confidence that suggested he had other aces up his sleeve. His lawyers eloquently argued that Maximus Thorne's purchase had violated multiple ancient laws and that Cordelia Vance had been held against her will through alpha coercion. When it was Maximus Thorne's turn to defend himself, he did something that surprised even Cordelia Vance. Instead of directly contesting the contract's validity, he invoked an even older law. the right of truth revelation. Under this law, anyone accused of crimes against honor could demand that all evidence be examined by a juror-seer, a woman with proven psychic abilities who could discern truth from falsehood. Constantine Shaw could not object without appearing to have something to hide. But Cordelia Vance could see the irritation in his eyes. This was not a complication he had anticipated. The juror-seer who was brought in was an elder woman with milky eyes that seemed to see through dimensions others did not even suspect existed. When she touched the document presented by Constantine Shaw, her reaction was immediate and dramatic. "This signature carries the echo of coercion," she declared, her voice echoing strangely in the circular hall. "It was made by a hand trembling with fear, not of free accord." Constantine Shaw tried to argue that Cordelia Vance's father might have been nervous for other reasons, but the seer was not finished. "There is more," she continued. "This document was touched by hands that smell of recent death. The one who presented it was present when life was taken by violence. It was a devastating blow, but Elder Constantine Shaw had survived decades of brutal politics by not being easily defeated. He retaliated with a revelation that made the entire hall choke in shock. If we are to speak of coercion and violence," he said, rising with theatrical authority, "then let us speak of the fact that Alpha Lord Maximus Thorn is holding this young Omega through a more subtle but equally effective form of control, a forced mate bond." The silence that followed was absolute. Constantine had found a way to turn Cordelia Vance's and Maximus Thorn's most personal and intimate discovery into a weapon against them. "I have evidence," Constantine continued, "that Cordelia Vance was drugged with substances that suppressed her capacity to recognize destined mates, and that Alpha Lord Maximus Thorn orchestrated the removal of these drugs during the journey to the Glacier Peaks territories, artificially creating a bond that appears genuine, but is, in truth, the result of chemical manipulation. The accusation was diabolically clever, because it contained enough elements of truth to be plausible. Cordelia Vance truly had been drugged. The mate bond truly had manifested during the journey, and she truly could not prove that her emotions had not been manipulated. It was in this moment of apparent despair that the second great twist of the case occurred. Cordelia Vance, under extreme pressure, and feeling that she was losing not only her freedom, but also any chance of justice for her royal archivist Arthur Vance's death, accessed a memory that had been not only suppressed by the lethalium, but actively repressed by her own trauma. On the night her father died, she had not been sleeping when the assassins arrived. She had been hidden in a secret closet in his study, reading by candlelight when she heard voices that should not have been in the house at that hour. Instinctively, she had hidden herself, but her position allowed her to see everything that transpired. "The contract was not signed by my father," she declared suddenly, her voice cutting through the lawyer's arguments. "It was signed by my uncle, Reginald Vance, 3 days after my father's death. I can prove this if you allow me to recite the Royal Registrar's journal, page by page." The assertion created immediate uproar. It was chronologically impossible that her father could have signed a contract after his death, but it also seemed unlikely that she could recite an entire Confederacy document from memory. It was then that the true extent of Cordelia Vance's abilities became clear to all present. For the next 4 hours, she recited not only the Registrar's journal, but related documents, witness records, and even conversations she had overheard, but not consciously processed at the time. Her words painted a meticulous tapestry of conspiracy, far beyond a mere forged contract. She revealed names, dates, financial transactions, and connections that exposed the Black Hand's entire network in chilling detail, knowledge only an insider could possess. It was when she recited specific bank codes that her abilities became terrifyingly clear. Constantine Shaw had blundered, conducting illicit business with his personal banker during the auction. Cordelia Vance observed not just participants, but their reflections in the hall's polished surfaces. Reflected in the banker's glasses, she had seen access codes typed into a handheld device. Her eidetic memory had absorbed those numbers, storing them without her conscious awareness at the time. "The bank accounts of the organization known as the Black Hand," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound power, "are 3729 Alpha Delta 66. She continued, reciting a chilling sequence that drained the color from Constantine Shaw's face. What followed was a controlled maelstrom. The codes Cordelia Vance provided were not merely valid, they unlocked a network of accounts funding corruption across all known domains. Crucially, they empowered the tribunal authorities to instantly transfer these funds to the mercenary guilds guarding the lunar nexus, securing their loyalty and preventing Constantine Shaw from employing brute force to evade legal ramifications. With his personal guard abruptly turning against him, their allegiance shifting with payment, Constantine Shaw attempted one desperate gambit, his eyes fixed on Cordelia Vance, burning with a predatory intensity that made her every survival instinct shriek in primal alarm. "If I cannot have her," he snarled, his voice distorting as he began a partial feral shift into his wolf form within the sacred hall, a grave violation of the lunar nexus's laws, "then no one can." The air in the tribunal crackled, thick with escalating tension. Cordelia Vance saw Constantine Shaw's claws extending, witnessed the bestial fury consuming his eyes, and knew with chilling certainty that this moment would define not only the remainder of her life, but whether she would have a life to live at all. It was the moment Maximus Thorne had unknowingly awaited. Witnessing his mate in direct peril ignited a primal, explosive response that overshadowed all political or strategic considerations. The silver rot in his veins, a curse that had plagued him for years, suddenly transmuted into a searing, purified fury. The gigantic werewolf that emerged from Maximus Thorne was not a sick animal fighting poisoning. It was an avatar of vengeance that had found absolute purpose, to protect his mate at any cost. The transformation was so swift and violent that Constantine Shaw, even in his partial wolf form, was caught completely unprepared. The battle was brutal and mercifully swift. When it concluded, Constantine Shaw was dead, his Black Hand organization was exposed and financially ruined, and the corruption that had spread through the confederacy of shifter domains like a cancer was finally being cut out at the root. But it was in the silent aftermath, as Cordelia Vance and Maximus Thorne locked gazes across the blood-stained hall, that the last and most unexpected twist revealed itself. Maximus Thorne's forced transformation, fueled by the desperate need to protect his Omega mate, had burned the silver rot completely out of his system. Not through medicine or magic, but through the chemical purification that occurs when the mate bond is finalized under extreme circumstances. Cordelia Vance's unique and modified biology, the result of the genetic experiments that had created her eidetic abilities, had filtered and neutralized his toxins the moment he claimed her as his mate through violent protection. The Confederacy of Hypax's project to create Juror-Seer Omegas had inadvertently created the cure for the curse they had attempted to use to control and eventually destroy the last independent Alpha Lord strong enough to resist their authority. They returned to the North not as master and purchased servant, nor even merely as husband and wife joined by political convenience, but as co-rulers of a new era. Cordelia Vance's perfect memory and Maximus Thorne's restored strength would ensure that no secret remained buried in the snow, and no corruption could take root in territories under their protection. On their first night back at the Ice Vein Citadel, finally alone and free to openly acknowledge the mate bond that bound them, Maximus Thorne led Cordelia Vance to the highest tower of the fortress. There, beneath the dancing lights of the aurora borealis that painted the sky in impossible hues, he paused so close that she could feel the heat emanating from his massive body. "Cordelia," he murmured, his raw voice heavy with a primal need that had been suppressed for months. His large, calloused hands rose to frame her delicate face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones with a reverence that made her tremble. The icy north wind contrasted sharply with the searing heat radiating between them. Every breath she took carried his masculine scent, quickening her pulse until she was certain he could hear her heart hammering against her ribs. "You are not merely my salvation, Cordelia. You were my vengeance against all who believed they could shatter something forged for eternity." When he finally lowered his head and claimed her lips, it was as if all the glacial ice of the north melted in an instant. The kiss began soft, reverent, but deepened swiftly as she pressed herself against him, her small hands clinging to the rigid muscles of his chest. She could feel the raw power held captive in his every movement, the way he restrained himself from crushing her against his frame. Yet she yearned for more. She craved the full weight of his strength and dominance, yearned to lose herself in the primal intensity of the mate bond that finally bound them. When they finally broke apart, breathless, with the ancient stars serving as silent witnesses to the passion at last unleashed, Cordelia understood that her eidetic memory had been holding space not for the past, but for this very moment, when two fated souls finally recognized each other fully and chose to forge a future where truth would prove mightier than any lie and love stronger than any chain. If you enjoyed this tale of an Omega with perfect recall who unmasked an international conspiracy and cured her fated alpha through the power of the true mate bond, subscribe for more epic Lycan King romances. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss new stories about destined mates, perilous secrets, and the triumph of love over corruption. Remember, sometimes the most crucial memories are those we are yet destined to create.